Namaskar. Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. This is Daily Global Insights, episode number 113, March 8, 2021. And I have with me Sridhar Chityalaji. Sridharji, I would just like to start with some main points and then let you expand on those. The first thing is Arunachal Pradesh is going to take up an east-west industrial corridor highway which will be funded mostly by the center, and this kind of covers almost the edge of Arunachal Pradesh towards China. Texas surges resources to border amid migration crisis and also develops plans to combat smuggling. India Inc. business confidence is at its highest in a decade. The rise in consumption leads the way. United States Defence Secretary Lloyd Austin to visit India after the Quad meeting. The first Quad meeting scheduled after Biden takes power. It will be an e-meeting. In US and LATAM news, the Senate passes 1.9 trillion stimulus bill. The notable exception in this is the fact that the $15 an hour minimum wage requirement across the United States has not made it. Sridharji, is this the now a point where everything will be frozen and things will start moving forward? What about the previous stimuli? All those money has been spent. What are your thoughts, sir?
Well, first and foremost, congratulations to Democrats and the Republicans. The Republicans for 0 votes and Democrats for 50 votes were in the tiebreaker by Ms. Kamala Harris as the vice president. So the stimulus bill is now passed, even in the Senate. So it is passed without any Republican votes. The only victory for Republicans is the $15 minimum wage, and there was at least a couple of Democrats who supported the notion of why $15 minimum wage doesn't make any sense. So it is now will be drafted into a law, and the stimulus checks of $1,400 will go out before the end of the month. And Biden has touted this and tweeted about this. This doesn't preclude the unspent $1 trillion, which will also be going out, because if you remember, it is 600 plus 1,400. That 600 runs for a period of time. Then the other aspect of it here is there's also the unspent money on the small business that would be preserved, that would also be rolled through this program. The most important message coming out of this stimulus is, and Washington Post is, and I've tweeted, Washington Post calls it as the poverty breaking barrier. And their whole concept is around these child credits, which is $3,000 for kids above 6 and $3,600 for kids below 6 years old. And this would be, a fairly lifelong tax credit. Remember, some of these laws can be re-amended. So the stimulus is here, and markets are bracing, and already I think the futures is up about 200 points.
And in Texas, there is a surge of illegal immigrants and also in smuggling. And the state is rushing resources to tackle with this crisis. At this time, was it necessary for Biden to do this? Could he have not waited until the COVID, came under a little bit better control?
I think Mr. Biden is on a very specific, targeted, progressive agenda. The question is how much of it is being driven by him and how much of it is being driven by other people, remains a question, because he's yet to give a press conference, by which I mean meeting the press rather than, remotely speaking with people. So I think that there is question marks even around his kind of health and why he is rushing all these things at one given stroke. Especially the immigration, the three important reforms that's bothering people. One is immigration, the second is the voter reform, and the third is this whole electoral reform. These three things are bothering people, the pace at which it is being done, and with actually no input from the Republicans. So is it necessary? The answer is no, sir.
And now the Senate hasn't still passed HR 1. What is your prognosis? Do you think it's also going to go down party lines?
I think it will go down party lines in the Democratic chamber. In the Senate chamber, also it will go along the party lines. However, for it to be enacted into a law, it requires close to 60 votes to make it work. So they're probably going to have 4 or 5 Republicans who may vote with the Democrats, just as it happened in the impeachment. So they still would require another 5 votes from the Republican side to make it. So HR1 seems to be a little bit on the loose ground, but who knows? They may come up with other types of measures by which they may be able to get this passed.
And the House has requested documents from Twitter reflecting Trump's positions or policies. Twitter has now permanently banned Trump. What good is this going to be? Why is the House wasting time on this?
I think that there is still this, they would go through, it's a political as well as to do the fact finding. The objective is to determine whether this is the tip of the iceberg and whether there is a broader agenda at play with Twitter and Facebook, where they could start choosing to ban one after the other Republican members who they consider as a threat to the Democratic and the left and the liberal and social agenda, where on the basis of the evidence, the tech platforms seem to be in cahoots with the Democratic Party.
And once again, China asks Biden to reverse the dangerous, what it calls as dangerous Taiwan policy. Is this a reaction of the fleet now doing up and down the first island chain and the second island chain, sir?
There are 2 reasons. One is they are continuing to assert this policy. And I think next year, if I'm correct, there is the China Congress, which is the biannual kind of Congress meeting comes up, where Xi Jinping proposes to announce the 2035 railroad network interconnectivity into Taiwan, which effectively means that they don't expect Taiwan to be separate or an independent country as it is. They expect it to be integrated. And Taiwan red flag has been raised by a number of countries. So China is increasing their rhetoric.
And in other news, US deploys B52 bombers to West Asia, that is the Middle East, in warning to Iran, US will defend troops and interests. So I'm again a little confused with the Biden administration's policy. Are they reaching out to Iran? Are they also saber rattling, or is it a mix of both?
Well, I think that there's been persistent and consistent kind of attacks on the Green Zone, and there's been persistent attacks on the U.S. base and the U.S. embassy around the Kirkuk, the northern western Syrian region, the borders. So I think U.S. is saying enough is enough. We're not going to tolerate any further. We have every right to protect our interests and our troops, because there has been a couple of deaths, both one civilian and one military serviceman. So I think that what they're saying is we're not going to take it idle. So we reserve the right to defend, and we will attack.
So you think these are all like posturing before Iran and US will again sit down at a negotiating table? What are your thoughts?
United States seems to be taking a policy that it wants to bring Iran to the negotiating table. There are a lot of interest groups, lobby groups, which are advocating this to the Biden administration. They would not even get a seat at the table or a hearing with Trump, and Trump was emphatic to punish Iran more. So I think what is going on here is a carrot and stick kind of an approach, which is to say, unless they stop everything, including the Houthi rebels in Yemen, they're not going to pursue. There is tremendous pressure from the world that Iran should not be at the table before they meet the UN obligations. There are soft tones in EU who align with Biden's policy. That's the reason why you're seeing all this flip-flop. As far as Israel is concerned, it is very, very clear it cannot afford to have Iran armed with nuclear weapons. It has made it very clear, and its defense minister has made it amply clear, that it will choose the moment and the time to attack so that they don't become a threat to the state of Israel.
In India news, India Incorporated Business Conference is at an all-time, or I should say, a decade highest in a decade. The rise in consumption is leading the way, and we will just come to this in 1 minute, sir. We are at the end game of COVID-19 pandemic in India, according to the Health Minister, Dr. Harsh Vardhan. And this seems like it's a very good news, sir, that India in business confidence is at a decade high.
Well, I think that there are two components. One is they say that there's a huge amount. This is the recent survey that's just come out over the weekend. There's a tremendous pent up demand. There's stimulus money. There's a fair amount of corporate profits. And so I think that there's also a lot of capital flowing in. We had talked about in the last week in one of the shows. Close to $60 billion of $63 billion of new capital has come in by way of foreign direct investment and also by way of equity flows in the first 9 months of the year. So I think there's substantive amount of capital. There is also pandemic-related low cost, low interest. So there is expending going on. There's also India tapping into the market of the exports. The PLI program has attracted investments into pharmaceutical, has attracted investments into mobile, has attracted into solar, and also into defense manufacturing. Now they're opening up for the chemicals, which is another area which is required both for industrial as well as for the pharmaceutical purposes. So what you're seeing is that all this money does flow in some way into the demand side of the system, not just purely on the supply side. And even corporations have come out and said that they would support the COVID vaccine programs for all their kind of staff. So what you're seeing is and India, along with United States, is one of the had a very big stimulus program, close to 10% of GDP. And all that, as a bearing on the demand side. This is not permanent. This will be in this pandemic year, and which is why the GDP of India is expected to be north of 12%, somewhere between 10 and somewhere greater than 10 to 12%, predicted by IMF and even the finance ministry.
Indian foreign exchange reserves rise to 585 billion. And in the next news, Arunachal Pradesh is going to take up an east-west industrial corridor highway project. And Sridharji, I'm putting up the map now of the Arunachal Pradesh news. And as you can see here, it starts from Taiwan and goes all the way along the border with China. Yeah, please go ahead, sir. Yeah.
No, I think that you're right. Along with Taiwan in the northwest border, going to east, and then going along the way. If you can see in one map where there's one point, there's a green arrow, and it is that is the Tibet, around
yes,
the Tibetan region. Then circles all the way back, as you can see on the eastern side. Finishing up near the Myanmar border. This is the Eastern Corridor project, and this connects into the Eastern Corridor, which goes into Myanmar and then all the way up to Thailand in the roadway. The roadway is already built along Myanmar to Thailand. It joins that. This would be what you call as the game changer for India, and on two fronts. One, it also builds infrastructure which it has not had along the border on the Arunachal Pradesh side, where China is also stepping up its kind of infrastructure. It has got a fast train project. We have seen some buildings come up not too far from, I think if I'm right, the upper I'm trying to read this graph. 1 minute. Let me see if I can read the graph better. In the upper Siang region, the West Siang region, this is where you have the Proximus infrastructure being built. So the story is that it is great that this is also called as Frontier Highway by Prime Minister Modi. And it is grateful that Arunachal Pradesh has accepted and co-developed this project with the center.
So it's about 1800 kilometers long. And do you have any idea about when it is going to be completed, sir?
It's just been started, so I think that this is a 3 to 4 years project. I would be surprised if it is not completed before 2024.
And you mentioned briefly about the bullet train project that China has been planning, and that I have got that map now. And the bullet train starts from Lhasa and comes all the way up to Ningxi, which is very close to the Arunachal border. And viewers, you can see it. I'm trying to point my mouse. I don't know if the mouse will be captured, but if you look south of Ningxi, that's where the Arunachal border is. So China also is trying to see how quickly it can get close to the Arunachal border. What state of completion is this one, sir? Has it started or is it yet to start? What is the...
Oh, no, it's well advanced. They expect to complete that by July this year. That particular project, railway line is expected to be completed by July this year. And from Lhasa to Chengdu is expected to be connected by 2030. That will effectively mean that they have rapid transport by rail all the way from Chengdu past Lhasa into the specific border region very close to Arunachal Pradesh in Ingchi.
Sir, as much as India can be expressing concern that China is rapidly trying to get accessibility towards India's border, this cuts both ways. If India manages to beat back China, it can use the same train lines, it can use the same infrastructure and go and hit at the strike at the heart of China. So this is not a one-way thing. The way I see it, it is essentially at the end of the day, who wins the conflict at what point? What are your thoughts, sir?
Exactly, that's what it is. I think that see, thus far they did not expect, and India had neglected this entire region for a considerable period of time. Modi quite correctly gave the priority to build infrastructure in this northeastern corridor, and right from the LAC all the way to the Arunachal Pradesh to this Myanmar border. If you recall, look east or go east was his strategy. So go east strategy is the road and the port infrastructure that they were planning to have from almost on the northeastern corridor, all going all the way up to past Vietnam, Myanmar, Vietnam, and going all the way to Thailand. And then eventually they wanted to go and make it connect with Indonesia after a narrow strip between, eventually connected to all the way to the eastern tip of the Indonesian island. So, and along the bend, they may go to Laos and Cambodia too. So this is the Eastern Strategy project. The reasons are very simple. South China Sea is cluttered, is occupied, and South China Sea has got all these different nations that we mentioned have the naval footprint. India does have by virtue of Quad. So India has covered the gap on two fronts. One, to harness and build its own infrastructure and face China eye to eye along this from LAC all the way here. But it also has built a trade infrastructure so that they can have interconnect potentially, as they had mentioned, Tibet, Nepal, Bhutan, India in that, Bhutan, Nepal, Bangladesh, India corridor. Because Bangladesh is, you can see right adjacent on the eastern side, close to Assam, in the narrow strip, you have the Bangladesh. So the whole goal was this eastern, infrastructure corridor, both on the port as well as on the road side. That was his project. It had both strategic deterrence as well as strategic trade map for all these specific states to come together. And we haven't quantified what the GDP of this entire region can look like as it navigates its way into Myanmar. This also is the reason why both China and India are more silent on the ongoing Myanmar coup and the confusion and chaos that prevails there along with ASEAN. It is more United States, Japan, and to some extent the European nations which have expressed concerns.
And in other news, Biden will be chairing the first Quad meeting in his administration. And this is going to be, we'll let you know about the details as it is still evolving, but it is happening this week. And after that, the US Defense Secretary is going to be visiting India. I have a hunch on what he's going to be talking about in that visit, but what are your thoughts? And then maybe I can compliment them.
Well, I think that the at least in both in the United States and India, the indications are that a planning meeting has already commenced between the remember Lloyd Austin is defense. The 2+2 meeting is about this is an extension of the 2+2 meeting past Quad, has both external affairs minister who covers trade and general partnerships along with the security which is covered by defense and national security advisor. So I think that the groundwork has been laid to reaffirm that United States will stand by the defense commitments. It wants a closer cooperation on the defense side, continue the cooperation on the defense side, and its commitment to Quad. They do not. I think that there's a lot of pressure on the Lloyd Austin side that they should not be a letdown. Having done all the good work thus far, and allow Russia to come in.
And to complement that, there's one other evolving situation that is happening, and this is regarding Afghanistan. And if what a letter that has been written by the Secretary of State to the Premier of Afghanistan is to be believed, United States wants to have a committee of a meeting of 6 countries, including India. That's a first. Usually they used to exclude India. Even Trump excluded India in Afghanistan related talks. But this one is being planned for 6 countries: United States, India, Pakistan, China, Russia, and Afghanistan. And this is to try and contain the Taliban's growing influence in Afghanistan, how to go about making sure that they don't inflict any further damage, because there is supposed to be a spring offensive in the offing. So we will wait and see how that goes. Sir, in other news, would you like to add to that, sir?
No, I think that's a great piece of complementary information you have shared, Sriji.
Thank you. And in Myanmar, unions are urging members to shut down the economy in protest. So unions are generally identified with the communist China, right? So this sounds a little different. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think this is people versus army. Suki, is representing broadly the social communist type of an agenda, which is probably one of the reasons why you have so much of contention. I don't know whether it's fair to say that India has closer connectivity with the junta, and China has probably closer connectivity, and some of the Eastern Europe or some of the European nations have also got a closer connectivity with Suki. So how close and how warm the relationship between India and Suki remains a question. So I would say that the Communist Party, the union supporting is more the Suki kind of model, and broadly with people which do not go back to the junta regime.
And in Europe, Middle East, Africa news, Israel is updating a plan to attack Iran. The planning is going to be independent of any other country, according to the Defense Minister Benny Gantz. Austria has suspended AstraZeneca after a batch causes deaths. The Swiss narrowly vote to ban face coverage in public. This is a very significant vote. I think this is now beginning to spread across Europe. I'd like you to give your input, sir, at this point. I have a couple more news items, but please feel free to chime in.
I think the key headline here is that Israel has effectively, what we call read the riot act. It is not going to allow a nuclear Iran, which is an existential threat to the state of Israel. So it will choose as appropriate the actions if it has to go alone in the world to do so.
And in other news, Londoners want their shutdown to be removed or ended soon, and the Russians are targeting Western vaccines with disinformation. So this is now not just China, but Russia also indulging in similar news. In markets, Fed Chairman Jerome Powell's new scorecard is driven by labor markets more than the conventional methods. What are your thoughts about that, sir? Why is Fed Chairman doing that?
It's very interesting. If I have to read it, it is more going towards the socialistic approach. If one has to, we probably will have a separate session to deeply analyze, what exactly are the transformative changes. They want to look at unemployment at the deepest kind of level. They want to look at, when I say deepest, what is deepest, which is namely those who have been long-term unemployment. Have that has been addressed? You can have a 6%, 7%, even a 5% unemployment rate. It leaves two data points out. One, how many have remained permanently unemployed for a long period of time? How is that gap going to be addressed? Number one. Number two is how many number of people have re-entered workforce and or have remained outside the workforce, which have not been factored in. How many young graduates and how many college leaving students have been able to find jobs? What is the unemployment levels at the young? Those who have passed college, those who have passed school, those who have, even done post graduation or graduation, as they say. So I think he's saying that they will be looking at the economic policies driven by a scorecard that represents these unaddressed universe rather than the aggregate universe that historically we have focused on. Remember, there's also going to be 12 million illegal migrants coming in, or illegal migrants who are sitting in United States, irrespective of the status that may be. They will also be looked at as he assesses the what I call as the monetary policy of the central bank. And quite quickly, just to add to the adjacent point, Janet Yellen has come back and said, "Hey, bond market yields are as a result of the economic recovery, not because of the inflationary trends." So it's almost like one after the one and the two, which is the Treasury Secretary and the head of the Fed Reserve are going tiptoe on this. Remember, Janet Yellen was the previous Fed governor, succeeded by Jerome Powell. What it lays down is the socialistic kind of monetary and fiscal policy framework that is on the anvil of being rolled out, because there is further consideration on the stimulus that includes minimum wage, universal minimum salary. There's a whole raft of programs that they're looking at. Life is not ending with this stimulus. So the Fed chairman's statement has a much deeper kind of context relative to how the interest rates is going to be handled in the country.
And last line item is the $1,400 stimulus checks are expected to reach everybody in the United States by the end of this month. Sridharji, that's all we have for today. If there's anything else you would like to add, we can do that now, or we can call this a wrap.
Fantastic. I think that we have more to come this week as the market digests Jerome Powell's statement, and as markets kind of evolve and understand what Janet Yellen is saying relative to Mr. Powell. And we will also have the rollout of the stimulus, and the political drama in Washington, D.C. will continue on the next two things which are going on, which is the electoral reforms and the voter reforms.
Thank you very much, sir. And as always, we'll be back tomorrow, same time, same location. Namaskar.
Namaskar, and have a wonderful day.